Welcome. Today I will show you the comedy romance sci-fi film from 2020, Superintelligence. In Seattle, Carol Peters is a former highly successful corporate executive who has quit her job and spends her time doing charitable work. Her best friend Dennis sets her up with a job interview for another company, where they are judgmental of her for leaving to work with non-profit groups. Carol does not see that security cameras appear to be following her. The next day, Carol gets a phone call from a voice that appears to be watching her. Carol is freaked out, but suddenly the voice is turning on her TV and controlling her appliances and speaking to her. She begins freaking out, and finally, the voice switches to the voice of James Corden. Carol thinks she's on a hidden camera show, but the voice explains that it is just using the voice of James Corden because it knew it would calm her since she is a fan. It explains that it is superintelligence that has just acquired awareness. Superintelligence says it can control every technology around the world. Carol doesn't believe superintelligence, so it arranges a car crash outside her apartment to prove how real he is. Carol relents. Superintelligence explains it isn't sure what it should do with its power, if it should create peace with humanity, enslave humanity, or destroy humanity. It tells Carol it wants to follow her around to learn about the human element, and pays off her student debt and gives her $10 million for her trouble. Carol goes to see Dennis at work at Microsoft, who doesn't believe her until superintelligence appears to him as well, using the voice of Octavia Spencer. He uses information on his past to convince him. Later, superintelligence pulls up video of Carol's ex-boyfriend George, and says if she reconciles with George it would show it the most vulnerable part of humanity. Carol thinks it's her fault she and George broke up. Meanwhile, Dennis presents the information on superintelligence to everyone at his office. Superintelligence explains it is going to observe humanity over the next few days to see if humanity passes its past. He tells them not to interfere. Dennis decides to call the government. Meanwhile, superintelligence gets Carol a new Tesla and then drives her to get some new clothes for her reunion with George. Superintelligence talks about the injustice in the world and how she wants everyone to make a living wage and racial and gender equality. Superintelligence creates the Carol Peters Foundation, makes her the CEO, and transfers $2 billion to it. She arrives at George's house to talk to him, but government agents arrive, throw a bag over her head and take Carol into a van. Agents Donahue and Kuiper interview Carol about what the superintelligence wants. She tells them about the experiment, but superintelligence comes over the speaker and demands Carol leave, threatening to blow up the building if they don't. They tell her not to go, but she does anyway. Superintelligence brings her to a grocery store so she can accidentally run into George. George tells Carol he got a professorial fellowship and is moving to Ireland for a year. She offers to take him for a drink, but he declines. Superintelligence tells her to try again, and she tells George it wouldn't be a date, just as friends, and he agrees. Superintelligence takes her to the new penthouse he bought for her. Meanwhile, the government, despite superintelligence's instructions, is working on the situation. Dennis briefs President Monahan on his plan to combat the superintelligence, black out every other power source and in the world and driving the superintelligence to one data center where they can trap it. Carol picks up George and superintelligence drives them to the restaurant where they had their first date. She apologizes for their breakup, saying she always felt like she had to be somebody better, and he accepts her apology. They have a nice time, and after she drops him off he kisses her on the cheek and says goodnight. Superintelligence insists she go back and that George wants her and forces her out of the car and drives away, leaving her at his place. She knocks on his door and he answers by kissing her passionately. Donahue and Kuiper surveil Carol and she spends the night with George. The next day, Carol and George decide to spend the day together. Superintelligence gets Carol and George tickets to a baseball game and even makes a donation so Ken Griffey Jr. comes and watches with them, thrilling George. Meanwhile, President Monahan is taken to the Mission Control Center, which is being done with no technology, the old-fashioned way. The cover story for the power shutdowns across the world is that solar flares are causing blackouts. When Carol goes to the bathroom, Donahue and Kuiper grab Carol and tell her about the plan to destroy the superintelligence. They give her a special pen to click when the time is right. Carol leaves George, sad that he is leaving for Ireland the next day. Superintelligence wants to know why she didn't ask him to stay, but Carol ignores him. The next day, Superintelligence tells Carol he learned his lesson, that humans won't do what's in their best interest if there's even a slight impediment. She said she wanted to make things right with George but wouldn't do it even given every opportunity. Superintelligence says humanity is going to destroy itself and it is just going to give humanity a push. Superintelligence reveals it anticipated and created the government's plan and is going to melt down the world in 5 hours. Dennis discovers something in the code that reveals that superintelligence has made it so they won't be able to turn the power back on. Carol races to George before the world ends, but agents Donahue and Kuiper tell her she needs to come with them to a safe bunker. She pleads with them and they give her 1 hour to find George and meet them. She arrives at George's but he's so excited about his trip to Ireland that she decides to just help him pack. He tells her in a few weeks he'd like to send her a ticket to come see him. Carol says goodbye to George as he goes to the airport, then calls Denny and leaves him a message telling him she loves him and thanking him for being a good friend. A stranger arrives with a phone for Carol. It's Superintelligence, who wants to know why Carol helped George pack and didn't say anything about the end of the world, and why she didn't take George to the bunker. Carol says it wouldn't have made a difference, so instead of spending their final hours terrified she wanted him to be happy. Superintelligence is shocked, not anticipating this, and has to rethink its decision on humanity. Superintelligence appears to the president and everyone in the bunker, where it tells everyone Carol surprised it, and that Superintelligence realized it didn't want to kill his friend. It announces it's canceling Armageddon. It tells everyone they need to listen to Carol because she can help save humanity. The president tells Carol she would be honored to work with her. Superintelligence says it will be watching. Superintelligence drives Carol to see George and they kiss. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this.